Imagine tucking your kids into bed on Christmas Eve, the air filled with the quiet hum of holiday excitement. Now imagine waking up just a few hours later to a nightmare. Your house is engulfed in flames, and 5 of your children are gone. This isn't the opening of a horror movie. This was the tragic reality for the Sodder family in 1945, and what followed was a mystery that would stretch across decades, haunting a nation and leaving more questions than answers. The official story was simple but heartbreaking. A fire, likely caused by faulty wiring, had tragically claimed the lives of Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder. But for their parents, George and Jenny, this explanation never sat right. From the very beginning, things just didn't add up. Why didn't the phone line work when they tried to call for help? Where was the ladder that George always kept propped against the house? And most chillingly, when the fire was finally extinguished, why were there no remains of their children found in the ashes? Experts at the time insisted the fire would have been hot enough to completely cremate the bodies, but George Sodder, who had worked in demolition, knew this was unlikely. He even conducted his own experiments with animal bones to prove it. The fire department, which took hours to arrive despite being only 2.5 miles away, conducted what the family felt was a cursory search before declaring the children dead. 5 death certificates were issued just a few days later. For the authorities, the case was closed. But for the Sodders, the search was just beginning. They refused to believe their children were gone. They began to piece together strange occurrences from the days and hours leading up to the fire. A man had been seen watching the younger children as they walked home from school. Another stranger had tried to sell George insurance, and when refused, had cryptically warned that his house would go up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. And just before the fire, a mysterious phone call came in, a wrong number from a woman whose voice Jenny didn't recognize. Was this all a series of bizarre coincidences, or were these the breadcrumbs of a sinister plot? The Sodders believed it was a kidnapping, that the fire was a diversion. They suspected a connection to George's outspoken anti-Mussolini sentiments within the local Italian-American community. Had someone sought revenge? Fueled by this belief, they offered a reward and erected a large, haunting billboard along Route 16, featuring the photos of their 5 missing children. It became a local landmark, a constant public plea for information, a monument to a family's undying hope. And then the tips started coming in. It was as if the children had vanished into smoke, only to reappear as ghosts in the stories of strangers across the country. A woman who ran a tourist stop in Charleston claimed to have served the children breakfast the morning after the fire. She said they were with 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent, in a car with Florida license plates. Another sighting came from a woman at a hotel in St. Louis who claimed one of the boys, Louis, had told her his name over and over. Reports trickled in, creating a frustrating trail of maybes and what-ifs. The Sodders hired a private investigator, C.C. Tinsley, who uncovered some disturbing information. He learned that the fire chief, F.J. Morris, had supposedly found a human heart in the ashes, but instead of preserving it as evidence, he had secretly buried it in a metal box. When confronted, Morris led George to the spot, and they dug it up, but the heart turned out to be beef liver, completely untouched by the fire. Morris's explanation: he had put it there, hoping that finding it would placate the family and convince them to stop their investigation. This bizarre and deceitful act only deepened the Sodders' suspicion of a cover-up. Years turned into decades. The billboard grew weathered, but the family's determination never faded. They traveled across the country, following every lead, no matter how faint. Every Christmas, they put up a tree and waited, hoping their children would come home. They never rebuilt the house, instead turning the site into a memorial garden for the children they refused to mourn. Then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, a letter arrived. It was postmarked in Kentucky, with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his mid to late 20s. He had dark, curly hair, dark eyes, and a familiar, almost uncanny resemblance to their son Louis, who would have been about that age. On the back of the photo, a cryptic message was scrawled: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Illel boys, and I know 132 or 35. The family was stunned. Was this him? Was this the proof they had been waiting for all these years? They hired another private detective to investigate the letter and the photograph. The detective went to Kentucky but was never heard from again. He simply vanished, taking the Sodders' money and adding another layer of mystery to the already convoluted case. The family added an updated photo of the man, presumably Louis, to their billboard, their plea now even more specific, but the identity of the man in the picture and the meaning of the cryptic code on the back remain unsolved to this day. So what really happened on that Christmas Eve in 1945? Let's look at the main theories. The first is the official story, a tragic accident. The fire was caused by faulty wiring, and the children's bodies were consumed by the intense heat. The strange events leading up to it were just coincidences, and the subsequent sightings were cases of mistaken identity, fueled by a grieving family's desperate hope. This is the simplest explanation, but it leaves so many questions unanswered. The missing ladder, the cut phone line, the chief's bizarre beef-livered deception, it all seems like too much to be pure coincidence. The second and more pervasive theory is kidnapping and arson, likely orchestrated by the Sicilian mafia. George Sodder was a vocal critic of Mussolini's fascist government, which wasn't a popular stance in a community with many recent Italian immigrants. The threats he received, the insurance salesman, the man watching his children, it all points to a targeted attack. In this scenario, the children were taken from the home, perhaps even by someone they knew, before the fire was set to cover the tracks. They were then spirited away and likely raised under new identities. The photograph of Louis would then be a genuine, if fleeting, attempt by one of the children to reach out. A third theory suggests a more personal motive. Perhaps someone in the town of Fayetteville held a grudge against the successful Sodder family and enacted a terrible revenge. This could explain the apparent local cover-up, the slow response from the fire department, and the strange behavior of the fire chief. It suggests a conspiracy of silence among a few key individuals, determined to hide the truth. As the years passed, George and Jenny Sodder went to their graves without ever knowing what happened to their children. George died in 1969, just a year after receiving the mysterious photograph. Jenny continued to wear black in mourning and tend the memorial garden at the site of their home until her own death in 1989. The remaining Sodder children and their descendants have continued the search, but the trail has grown cold. The Sodder Children mystery is a powerful story about the unknown. It's about a family's love that refused to be extinguished by fire or time. Did 5 children perish in a blaze, or did they live out their lives somewhere else, under different names, perhaps wondering about the family they left behind? Was it a tragic accident, a mafia hit, or a local conspiracy? The billboard is gone now, but the questions it asked still echo through the hills of West Virginia. The truth remains locked away, perhaps forever. What do you think happened? Do you believe the children survived? Was the photograph of Louis real? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested in more unsolved mysteries like this, make sure to like and subscribe.